most of us come alive when we're serving. We do. When we see the benefit and value of what we do, and a lot of cops, we enjoy that people
sense
connection.
of purpose.
Mm-hmm. Yes, exactly, right? That has been taken, and that's because of a compression and constriction right now. I was talking to a couple officers yesterday, and there's guys that are like, boss, I would love just to go shoot hoops for 30 minutes with those kids in the park. I haven't done that for 2 years.
Isn't that cool? Yeah.
We would love to serve. I mean, we'd love to get back and involved again with the immigrant communities as we were.
That's what I want to see. I know the power of story, and everybody has got a story.
Portland, of all places, there's a lot of tough conversations.
Well, we're going to explore what we can do to make a difference in the community. We're going to hear a lot of opinions and ideas.
The mission of Portland Interview Magazine podcast is to connect. This is the Portland Interview Magazine podcast with your host, Dave Dahl, on Talkcast PDX.
Welcome to Portland Interview. We are blown away by our guest today. We're honored that he is willing to spend his time with us. His name is Captain David Abrahamson, and we're all about, like Jathan, for instance, is our other guy this here, Jathan Jenove. Well, Jathan Jenove. I'm going to get that right. To me, Jenove is just way cooler than it sounds.
It's Italian.
So, between us all, Jathan has different views than I do. He's more liberal and I'm more conservative. But we all feel the same. We all want to have a great community. None of us wants to be like hateful of each other, and neither one of us, Jathan or I, is about defunding cops or in any way disrespecting police. There's a lot of bad cops out there. There's a lot of bad people out there. But I don't think this guy's one of them. So I'm going to introduce you right now to this rather handsome officer of the law. Sorry about my voice, folks. But his name is Captain David Abrahamson.
Thanks, Dave.
Welcome.
Thanks for having me. No, it's good to be here. Appreciate your guys' time.
Well, because of my voice and because Jathan has sort of an agenda, I'm going to pass it to Jathan for now.
Okay. Well, thanks, Dave. The agenda is pretty simple. I think we want to hear from David about what's going on in terms of, nationally and locally, in terms of support for the police, challenges to the police, what's happening there. And then at some point, I want to talk a little bit about something that I think would better equip police officers for dealing with difficult situations, which I refer to as verbal Aikido, and would love to get David's comments on that. Yeah. And I'm thinking just to get the ball rolling, though, David, I think you indicated before there's been some updates. I think when we talked before, it was kind of at the nadir in terms of, views of the police and what it was having and the impact on employment and morale, just even staffing. But I think you've said things have gotten a little better. So tell us more.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if I'd use the word like better. I don't think that we have, transitioned to a place. I think we're still in flux. I think, anytime you look at social shift within society, it takes 3 to 5 years really for the dust to settle, for that reframing to take place. And I think what we've seen is public outcry. And that's reasonable. You look at what's taken place across the nation in law enforcement, and we look at the abuse of any position of power, the impact that has on people who trust us, who put us in those positions. And that's what we've seen, is we've seen that outcry, that voice of the public to say, hey, look, let's reframe how things have been done. Let's bring accountability to the systems, which is good. You look at defunding like we talked about, and I think, again, the heart of why the public, and not all public, but why the public who have been supporting the defunding movement, why that takes place, and I understand that. I don't think that's the right decision.
Well, you're just too diplomatic, dude, but go ahead.
Yeah, I don't think that's the right decision. I think, if you want to look at reframing, what does that look like? If we want to look at different innovative approaches to social justice or social reform, both in law enforcement, within the justice system, what do those look like? And that takes time. And that needs to come from the public, right? And so I think, again, the next 2 or 3 years, there's going to be some more reframing and movement that takes place. You look at House bills that passed, House Bill 2829 or 2928, excuse me, and that really constricts law enforcement as far as the tools that we can use in a crowd control setting.
Can you explain that to us a little bit?
We can only, at this point, we can only use our hands, really, or a baton to push somebody, but we can't take any other action. And if you look at and we're waiting for
pepper spray, none of that.
No, none.
Okay.
So frankly, unless there's a life safety, there's exigency right now. No,
Okay.
we can. Frankly, we'd have to use deadly force. But you look at tools and
I
resources.
don't understand that. That's where I get kind of lost.
Yeah, frankly, we're looking for clarification right now from the Attorney General's office as far as this bill. It's people look at a bill, and I do this too. I will acknowledge I've looked at bills before. I read the 5 lines. I go, oh yeah, sounds good, right? Check that box. We sign our name and we submit it in the mail. And I don't think really people understood the ramifications, and I don't think that was the intent of the bill. Right? People want reform. They want accountability. But now, if there's a life safety situation, we can't go in there and use a less lethal from 40 yards away, right, to deter that person from taking further action. We can't use pepper spray, right?
Or a bullet. What do they call them?
If somebody has a knife in that situation, right? We have to now either we have to disengage completely, or if we're put in a position, frankly, where we have to take action on somebody else's behalf, we have to use deadly force, and that's tough.
That is absurd to me.
And I'd agree with you. It's tough. Yep.
Yeah, because that's really what our problem is that people die instead of something else happening that could be much less, give a person a second chance, and then also not destroy the life of the officer who may have, been in a situation where he didn't really feel like he had another choice. You know what I mean? So it's such a tough situation.
Yeah, and there's been a dozen House bills that have come down end of July, transform really how we do business, and some of those are good, but again, I think that it's going to take some time for the reframing, for things to swing back. I think where there's more of a place of homeostasis, and so we do see more. I think the funding from City Council, and I think from the public too. There was I think the CS group, and I don't know what the abbreviation stands for, but just released a survey this past week where I think 82% of the public is supporting providing additional funding to increase our staffing.
Well, they've learned their lesson, haven't they?
Well, in
a sense.
Yeah, you look at the shootings. We have more than 1,020 shootings to date in the city of Portland.
Crazy.
Never before do I think we've ever had that many shootings.
I doubt it.
And so you look at, and this is just my personal opinion. I understand I'm in uniform when I say this, but my personal opinion is when you have, and I don't think that we have disengaged. I still see officers, even in the last few weeks that I've been at East Precinct, that are still making good decisions and making arrests and advocating on behalf of victims and putting their safety on the line to do so.
Well, probably also including their their litigable sort of status. And it's like, cops don't, everybody wants cops to be so, I love accountability. I do. I'm a big fan. But accountability where it's weighed too far in one direction is not fair.
Be interested in this, but there's this concept called sometimes the law of unintended consequences. Something happens, it's bad, and there's an outcry. We got to do something about it. And so it feels good, but there isn't an analysis of if we do this that might prevent another George Floyd or whatever, are there any unintended consequences? What I'm hearing, and be interested to get your take on this, is there from that reaction that this is too far, we've got to do something, we're now experiencing unintended consequences, which include a rise in crime. Mm-hmm. Is that, how accurate is that?
I think that's very accurate. I think that, and if I can qualify that, I think there has been an increase in crime. When you look at data from the late 90s, when we had almost 1,100 officers here in Portland, you had about 506,000, I think was the population at that time, that lived here in Portland. Now we have about 670,000, or close, right? And I think we have seen an uptick in crime. We're seeing an uptick because in unreported crimes, I believe, because there now is lack of confidence in the police. Victims, if anybody here has been a victim of crime and tried to report it to the Portland Police Bureau.
I've been a criminal more than I've been a victim of crime. The only crime that's ever been committed on me was by cops.
Well, actually, 2 nights ago in our driveway, somebody cut the catalytic converter off our Prius.
Oh, did they?
Yeah, and so I finally gave up on talking to somebody, but I managed to put some kind of report in online. Yeah.
That doesn't do you any good, though, probably.
I'm not expecting anything.
I mean, we have people waiting for, I think, 3 or 4 hours every single day to get through to non-emergency, and they can't get through to non-emergency to file a report.
Well, they really don't have enough cops, right? Isn't that really what's up?
And staff, I guess.
That's what I mean, staff. So, I mean, in reality, anybody who thinks you want to defund the police, you're nuts. The thing is, cops, even when they're bad, still necessary. I mean, I was a bad boy, and the cops treated me badly. I always thought, and you guys, can take your own view on this, but I always thought that I was playing a game where, the cops beat me up. Okay. They shouldn't have. But I just kind of thought, well, I'm an asshole. So, maybe that's what I got coming. So, I mean, that was me. That was my view. Mm-hmm. I don't have that view nowadays. I don't like to see cops taking advantage and hurting people or, just treating people wrong. But I do believe in holding people accountable. So it's a tough thing.
Yeah, and we have to, right?
Yeah.
And we need the public input. That shouldn't just come from an internal process. That needs to come externally, as far as those checks and balances.
You have to be held accountable.
And that oversight, absolutely. Yeah. And I think the majority of us had tried so hard for so long to do it well. We don't want the industry jeopardized, right? Bring accountability. Get rid of those people who are. It's a detriment on the industry, like anything else. It's a shame. It's a shame you went through that experience yourself.
Well, I've had it with regular cops on the street, and I've had it with corrections officers inside the prison, and in jail. So there was sort of a culture at that time. Now I'm talking 90s, right? 80s and 90s. There was a culture where you just got beat up sometimes. If you said the wrong thing, you're just going to get beat up. Or they don't like you, they're going to beat your ass. They weren't killing you. They were just really like, we're going to punish you. And we're in a position to do that. So, that's not a good culture. That's not a good culture. And I know we've talked before, and I know that it's not as bad as it used to be. And it probably was never that bad in Portland. But accountability for cops and accountability in general is something that's very important to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I agree with you. There was a different era where it was you drag your knuckles into a community, and that's how you brought accountability. And people feared the police. I mean, there's different areas of town where, I would drive through, and there's stories there that people still tell, like you, and unfortunately, that's not uncommon, and that's horrific when we hear that. I have no response to that.
Well, I think you guys remember I shared this story of my client in the construction industry who his dream was to be a cop, an LA police officer, and he achieved it. And he was, on the force. He got a call to a domestic situation in Watts. 3 white police officers go in, and there's this very large, muscular black man who's raging. Okay, and he's yelling. He doesn't appear to be armed, but he appears to be pretty intimidating.
Do you have any idea what was the call about?
Yeah, well, there was, as they came in, there was a woman sitting on a couch, kind of crying softly, some bruising.
So he'd been beating her up.
He'd probably been beating her up.
Yeah.
And so the officers go in, and he's in this little kitchenette. He's positioned so they can't circle him, and he's yelling at him. He's going to, blankety blank, your kick, your this, that, and the other.
Yeah.
And he's telling them to line up for their beatings. Okay, along with some F words and some references to race in the other direction. Yeah. And so my friend, later client, Corky, goes up to him and he says, "Okay, sir, we'll grant your wish. We'll fight you one at a time." And the guy's like, "Oh," and he said, "I just have one request." "What?" He said, "I want to go last. Gives me the best shot at taking you."
Yeah, well, you get tired out.
Right. But what it did is it scrambled the guy's brain.
Yeah.
All of a sudden,
it was like a one-liner.
He has to sort of reprocess this. And so what he did was he said, "All right, blankety blank, you can cuff me." Put his arms out, cuffed him, brought him in. No violence, no issues. So everybody's joking about it at the precinct station. Corky and I'll go, I just want to be last. And so it's this joke and everybody's, getting a kick out of it. And then he gets a call that the captain wants to see him. And he goes in thinking, maybe pat on the back, whatever. And he said that he gets a reprimand. And the captain says, "You embarrassed the LAPD. You had weapons. You had other means to take this guy. You showed weakness." And he was so
surprised,
so blown away and so bummed out, he ended up leaving the force, got into the construction industry, which is where our paths crossed.
Construction's way better than being a cop.
So let me get your reaction to that, David. But this isn't, by the way, this was in the early 1970s, for reference.
Yeah, I mean, that's unconscionable. I mean, when I hear that, I think, man, that's something I would see, on TV, frankly, on a show or in a movie for that era. And I have to say my experience has been in Portland for the most part. But when I've gone back to the East Coast for month-long trainings, there is a different culture of policing that is different around different areas of the country. Down east, down south. And in my personal opinion, my hope is that the Department of Justice or something similar sweeps the nation for best practice and for accountability. So there's consistency in our trade across the board as far as expectations.
So what you're saying, okay, now this is a big point of view here, big question. You think, okay, that sounds like federalism of police, which is a whole nother political issue. If you give up your sovereignty to the feds, doesn't that create a whole nother set of problems, do you think?
And I would agree with that. I think there's a distinction here where just like you have any other trade, right? You have, like in the business field, there are checks and balances, right? Sure. For what you do or for any business, there's those expectations, right? There's inspections, whether you're a contractor with the CCB down at the state, right? They're
but
for
most
each trade.
Of those are state run, though. They're more locally.
They are, but they're off of federal concepts too and principles, right?
Okay, so I think these are probably heavier questions than we need to get to today. I do believe that we got to be careful when it comes to federalizing police. I think it creates, like I said, new problems. But I mean, it'd be great to have federal guidelines that do something to kind of say, okay, this is how it's supposed to be done. If you guys go beyond this certain point, then it becomes federal.
And I agree with that too. Okay. And unfortunately, though, the longer we wait, right, with that freedom, I think a lot of times that there's a lot of agencies that are 20, 30, 40 years behind. Still like what you referenced a little bit about that, your associate's experience in LA. And I mean, I was back east and observed an interaction on a ride along with an agency. It was in DC. Okay. And this is over a decade ago. But I had my own personal observation where that would have not flown here today. Again, it would have been something you would have seen on TV. And I quietly addressed the issue later, behind the scenes. But I still think that there has to be standards and there has to be accountability.
I totally agree.
And it shouldn't come on the shoulders or I think on the heels of abuse of power or the career being jeopardized and those we serve, I think.
But we gotta avoid this woke ass kind of like, cops are bad, they're racist. I mean, honestly, I don't see that. It's not how I look at it.
And I don't either, to be honest with you. And I think people know me internally within the Bureau will say I'm just a straight shooter.
Yeah.
I have seen one time in my career when I was still on probation, anything close to being excessive force. And I've worked for 21, 22 years now. Probably arrested a couple thousand people. Couldn't sit still, was extremely proactive early on in my career. And one time have I seen somebody being taken into custody where there was an extra shot to the ribs. And boy, I gave that guy the sergeant's name if he wanted to file a complaint.
What was your position at the time?
I was an officer. I was still on probation.
Regular officer.
Yeah.
And that's interesting. So, you don't see a lot of that in Portland. Although, I mean, that's my view. Although, I pissed off some cops enough to where they beat the heck out of me. Here, not in Portland exactly. It was like, well, it was Southwest Portland, and it was Washington County cops. And, this is all public record. None of this is me just talking off the cuff. It's public record, but my attorney was a defense attorney, and he was a high-powered, good defense attorney because I had money, And I would say he failed to do something on the civil side that he should have done, which was sue the cops. And, to me, knowing what I know now, you sue them because they're going to sue you. You got money. They sued me, believe it or not. And I settled out of court for $25,000 whenever they wanted millions. But my civilian or my civil attorney, he was like, dude, this is going to tear you up if you fight this thing. Yeah, you have a good case. You're going to beat it probably, but $25,000 compared to the shit you're going to go through is just probably not worth it. If we can settle for $25,000 plus, I can still talk about it. You know what I mean? That's the deal. The other part of the deal is, and you can still tell the story. So it is what it is, and the story is fairly well documented, actually. Do you understand where I'm going with that? I'm basically saying that there is dirty cops. There are dirty cops, but I don't hold all cops to that standard. You know what I mean? I just don't think, I've had bad experiences with cops.
I have a sort of different take. I'm not saying there aren't bad cops, but I think there's maybe a lot of what I would say untrained or not properly trained cops. And the example I'll use is I work a lot in the private sector in conflict resolution, including how do you deal with verbal attacks and verbal threats. And I refer to this concept called verbal Aikido, which is instead of fight or flight, you engage. And I've coached and trained this morning. I was coaching, and it works. And so when I've watched a number of the videos where there was some form of violence with the police, okay? And I just keep seeing these opportunities to de-escalate verbally,
give us
even
example.
using some fundamental principles of neuroscience. You see what Corky did in 1971 can be trained. But basically what he's doing when he has that raging is he's crossing the guy's circuits. That guy's in a limbic state, fight or flight, but he's engaging with him in a way.
He's expecting a certain
You can't be in fight or flight, limbic system, and be your prefrontal cortex same time. So when he asks him a question or says, okay, well, that's first of all, he's not expecting that, right?
Well, can you tell me
how? And then he goes, one request. So now the guy's got to process that. And then he's got to process what's just said. That approach can be trained. And in pretty much every video I've watched, that wasn't there. Okay? It was force or threat of force.
How would you have been able to use that in the George Floyd incident, for example?
Well, the George Floyd, I haven't seen enough of the video Okay.
Yeah,
but I'd have to really study the video, but I've watched enough. Like the NBA player who got tased after he said, why are you going into my house and I can't go in my house? And, and then I try to push him, and then he pushed back and they tased him. Okay. There were, if you look at that video, we could watch that video together. There's a Portland video too, that it was actually shown in support of the police. So, and the showing was There's a woman who was, I don't know if she's Antifa, whatever. She's protesting, okay? And she's...
Well, you're Antifa, aren't you?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
And Proud Boys. I cover all bases. I check all the boxes.
Universal approach.
Yeah,
like that.
You just never know what to bet on, dude. So I just bet on all. But anyway, so she's blocking a squad car, and they're telling her, you need to move. Or and she's spouting every other word, F this, F that, and she's obviously something's not right with her. But she repeatedly says, I have a college degree. You effing, I have a college degree. Effing, and what they do is they just say, ma'am, you need to move or we're gonna have to arrest you. Ma'am, we're gonna college degree.
Well, what else do you do? That's
Well, think about it. Okay, if you know verbal Aikido of any basic concept, when she goes F, I have a college degree. What if other than just repeating, move or be arrested, they eventually arrest her. Okay, what might you say?
Ma'am, where'd you attend college?
There you go.
Something along those lines.
Where did you go? Yeah, what did you study? Oh, my cousin Jim went there.
That is really cool. That's a great place.
And her brain has to go to a different place.
You almost just have to have a sense of humor, but, and very much respect.
Well, yes. And also a framework where you go into that situation, okay, with the idea that if the person seems agitated, where you're curious yourself of what might I say, what question might I ask, that will, de-escalate it or scramble the agitation.
You got to become a social worker as well as a cop. Hey, let me switch. I think it's time to switch because he brought some things.
Okay.
Do you want to talk about what you brought?
I'm good still touching base on this.
Oh, okay.
I think what you keyed on, Jathan, I think is really important. And just that emotional intelligence aspect, right? And that's tough to trap and capture, I think, on the front end when you're screening candidates. You can some, and I think we do as good as we can, but I still think they can be honed. And frankly, I was trying not to chuckle because I'm thinking, boy, if I could just interject those well into my marriage or personal relationships, then you can do them well when you're at work, right?
I've gotten much better at it over the years.
But it takes effort, doesn't it?
Yes,
it takes time.
Experience.
It does.
Skill.
And I think that comes obviously with training that you touched on. I think that the Bureau, and again, this is just information. We need to continue to improve, right? But I think that this is something that we've recognized. Traditionally, we hadn't done well. When I got hired back in 2000, it was optional if you wanted to attend crisis intervention training, which came out in the mid-late 90s. And that training was a week-long training,
Was it effective?
I think it was effective, yeah. But I mean,
it should have been mandatory, I think.
Well, now it is.
Oh, okay. Good.
So in 2007, they started to see that there was a trend and a need, and why should this be optional if we only have 50 or 60 cops that have volunteered for this?
I wish the guys that arrested me last time had that. I think it would have been different, but go ahead. I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, you're good. In 2008, we had about 1,700 uses of force. We rolled out crisis intervention training. That year, we had 378 incidents where we tased individuals. In 2018, after all members have been crisis intervention trained, and in 2013, we rolled out enhanced crisis intervention training, so another 40 hours, and how we talk with subjects who are in crisis or deal with people, really to de-escalate and diffuse, to understand that cognitive process, to understand what's the overall objective and goals, creating distance, creating time.
De-escalate and diffuse. Those are powerful words.
They are.
Yeah.
And since then, we have, I think it's 41 tasing incidents in 2018. So it went from 378 in 2008 when we started crisis intervention training and mandating that, and it's now down to 41 in 2018.
Wow.
The uses of force, they're down between about 450 to 600 every year now. And we've actually in 2017 added a handful of other.
In other words, the difference between what they were before is like 450 to 600.
Trying to accomplish our objectives, right?
Okay, so you've reduced those numbers, is what you're saying?
Significantly.
Yeah.
I mean, our uses of force have plummeted by more than 1,100 on average, 11 or 1,200. Our tasing instances, if you look at almost being 400 and now they're 40, that's a significant decrease. And really, what's our overall objective?
But you're still effective at being able to enforce the situation or deal with the situation. Because I'm like, my concern these days is like the politics of things makes it difficult to even do your job. So that's my kind of caveat or question about that, reduction of incidents or problems. Still being able to do your job and reducing the number of terrible incidents or bad incidents.
And I'll be frank, I mean, you hit on something that is real. I think the fear for officers to think, boy, if I take action, am I going to be scrutinized here? That's there some. I think that we've pushed that too, again, for personnel to be mindful really of our duty to intervene. Because if we don't, now are we empowering people, and is that going to be worse long term? And there's a balance there. It's situational, case by case.
In other words, enabling people, right? So now I just want to quickly address qualified immunity. Can you tell me your view on qualified immunity?
I haven't given it much thought, so I'm shooting from the hip, just to be frank with you.
So am I.
I think there's too much variation in interpretation, even from attorney to attorney, when you ask an opinion. So if we're doing our job, and it's within directive, it's within policy, it's within state statute, right? But even if it's ugly, because sometimes events are ugly, they just are. Yeah. Even if we try our best, there was one that came through yesterday I was reviewing, and it was just ugly. But it was within policy, and the officers did everything they could do not to use force, and it was a Donnybrook. They would have ended up shooting this guy, and an outside agency said that. We thought we were going to end up shooting this guy. It was a horrific situation, and I believe they did a good job. But if that goes to a city attorney, let's say that's a deadly force incident, will that be viewed the same? If it's political, will those in power that have that ability?
And it isn't just about anything that gets to a certain level.
Yeah, and then you have people that are at-will employees that may not have representation. How is that viewed? And that's tough. And so I think if it's within, there needs to be direction and framework that provides support and consistency, so it doesn't change from attorney to attorney that looks at that case and go, we aren't going to indemnify this one.
So this is something that's not cut and dry. This is definitely a complicated issue. And just like everything else we're talking about, it doesn't have like a simple answer. It's something that we got to work on, but some people are going to get screwed along the way. That's the way I see it. There's some cops are going to get screwed. Some people are going to, some civilians will be screwed. And I mean, that's just the way it's going to be. It's always going to be that way. But if you're working toward, something, that's kind of what I was kind of driving at is, are we, qualified immunity? When I think about it, I'm like, well, if you take away a cop's ability to do his job, I mean, you basically neuter him, right? You just take all of his power away. That won't work for me. And I have a guy who's been beat up. I've been hurt by cops pretty bad, more than once. But I always was playing the game, so I lost. I hit the Noid, right? That was my mindset at the time. I have a different view than a lot of people. I'm really like, cops need to be able to be tough and do their job. And so, but I know that every time they do, there's going to be some political situation that's going to happen. There's going to be some attorney that's going to say, we got this guy. We're going to get this cop. And so I'm probably asking an impossible question.
You know, I think there needs to be a consistent framework again to safeguard, and I think process is important. When people know they can trust the process, then you'll have people continue to stay in the profession. Right now, with the unknowns, even House Bill 2928, if you read that House bill, if you fall outside that policy or that directive, you can be prosecuted, and for a crime. So even unintentionally, all right, we train all the time. Hey, I'm going to go to my OC, my pepper spray real quick, right? Because this person, they have a weapon. And it's responsive, reactive, and it's in a crowd control setting.
Tough,
they can be
man.
prosecuted. We've had more than, I think it's about 130 to 150 people within the Bureau of the 950, 960 members we had last year that have voted with their feet, and they have left the Bureau. We're down to 780 officers now. And so, again, bring
How many
bring
were there
accountability.
last year? How many were there before that? What was it? What was the
Our
number?
staffing was right around 1,000 2 years ago.
Okay, so you lost about 22% or something.
Correct.
Yeah. That's, and I don't blame them. See, I'm incredibly supportive of cops, considering everything I've been through. I mean, I think I just think they need to improve, they need to be held accountable, just like everybody else. That's all. But I worry about things like qualified immunity because, man, the guy, it's not fair to put a guy in a situation where he's likely to lose his livelihood and his freedom if he does his job. So that's a tough thing. What do you think?
Yeah, well, and also it's one of those that can give rise to what I talked about, the law of unintended consequences. Because if you remove it, for instance, you're going to affect behavior. And that behavior may not be in the best interest of the public. Okay? And so that's why I think sometimes you get these overreactions. Defund, defang, make it easier to sue.
Those are just
and they
radical,
don't realize.
Those are radical ideas.
Yeah, well, they don't realize, there are consequences. And some that may not be foreseen or intended.
Well, because some people have this idea of cops as being just these terrible human beings. There's a culture of bad cops, and so why not defund that and create something else? It doesn't work for me. To me, it's retraining. It's improving what we have.
Yeah, and to your point, just to clarify, when I talk about, I think all police officers should be trained in verbal de-escalation and should have a protocol where they at least ask themselves at the outset of an engagement, is there an opportunity for this? And then even if it's not at the beginning because there's a weapon or something, was there an opportunity for it?
Yeah, sometimes you don't have a chance.
But it has nothing to do with defund or defang or taking away. It's just saying before you go to these other approaches, okay, ask yourself, is there an opportunity? And the beauty of it is, right, with cameras, is you can do an after the fact analysis. See, that would be fun for me.
That's
Remember I asked
true.
to do about doing
I like
ride-alongs.
that.
We can't do ride-alongs because of COVID. But see, I wanted the opportunity to be in real situations and then debrief with the officers and say, well, what if? Or, hey, what if you said here or did this? Because I think once people start to realize that, hey, if it works at home, it should work in these situations too.
Well,
to your point,
a cop
And,
should probably be able to should be trained to think through situations, and basically be ready for the situation. And then you have your body cam, and it's like,
Which I hope we get in the next year and a half. We've wanted
I
them.
wish they'd had them.
We've wanted
I
them.
wish they had them in my case.
yeah.
A couple times. But anyway, body cams and training to see something through, to play the tape through, as we say in AA. You're like, okay, when you play this tape through, how does it end? Maybe you come in a situation, guy's holding a gun. He's going to shoot you.
Right.
He's crazy. He's nuts. And,
Probably not a great occasion for verbal Aikido.
yeah. But some of these are like pretty simple, they're obvious. He's got a body cam. So that makes it a lot better. I think that's a really cool thing. The taxpayers should be willing to pay for that. That's something that it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and that House bill to support that just went through too, right? I mean, I'm thankful for. We've wanted it for the last 6 years, so it hasn't been our decision not to have them.
Well, that's cool. Yeah, I mean, that it actually takes away some of that. What do you call it? Liability or worry about doing your job. Now, I want to. I think we're running out of time. I want to make sure that Captain Abrahamson, is able to get out anything that he wants to get out. I see he brought some materials. I don't know if we already discussed that. This is full of
data and stats, and I know we were going to be talking about de-escalation and using verbal Aikido and verbal judo techniques. So I can leave that with Jathan to take a look at. I think if I could make one point that I think is so important. I think right now we need resources, and people have heard that. But we need resources in order to accomplish, I think, proper and apt service for the public.
Okay.
It's not a fight that, hey, look, you're taking our positions away or our functions. When you look at the heart of community policing and why we do what we do and who we serve, we can't even follow up on calls right now. We're taking 400,000 or 500,000 crimes in person from people every single year. Some heinous crimes that detectives, they're buried. They can only take a certain amount, right? And they're getting filed.
That's in Portland alone?
They're just getting filed. They're just getting filed. And so there's no follow-up. And I think what brings most of us to this profession is really providing voice and providing justice to those who frankly don't have voice. And when we don't have that ability, I think that's disheartening for a lot of officers right now. Is it's going call to call to call to call to call. They're buried. They're coming off the heels of an unprecedented year where there has been a direct attack on law enforcement here in Portland. Portland experienced something unique that no other city did. 179 nights of protests every night after night after night.
Is that still happening? I don't watch local news much, but my wife said, it's still happening.
This weekend, there has been a couple protests in this last week. $500,000 worth of damage and vandalism to businesses just took place, and unfortunately, we had to watch. Because
can't do nothing about it.
Well, I mean, do you put officers in harm if you don't have enough resources, right? To go in and out, try to use hands. If all I can use is my hands, it's going to turn into Donnybrook, right? Or are we precipitating a deadly force incident when we see people there with weapons, right? And so that's
explain what a Donnybrook is. I'm sorry, I don't. I want people to know that.
Yeah, that is just a fight, frankly.
Yeah.
Okay.
That
Katie bar the door.
Yeah, Katie bar the door. Yeah.
Okay. So it just takes away safety, and it's insane.
Yeah.
So, obviously to me, it's very important to keep the violence to its lowest level. And property damage just pisses me off. It's like, what's wrong with these people? That's just my view. Mm-hmm. Jathan is actually one of those guys, so I don't want to put Jathan down because he's an Antifa, one of the up guys.
I run the organization. Yeah, I admit.
But anyway, I'm lying. But I'm just like, God, we got to be able to do something about it, right? Mm-hmm. We can't let that shit happen.
Well, I think even community policing, right? Most of us come alive when we're serving. We do. When we see the benefit and value of what we do, and a lot of cops, we enjoy that people
sense
connection.
Of purpose.
Yeah. Yes, exactly, right? That has been taken, and that's because of a compression and constriction right now. I was talking to a couple officers yesterday, and there's guys that are like, boss, I would love just to go shoot hoops for 30 minutes with those kids in the park. I haven't done that for 2 years.
Isn't that cool? Yeah.
We would love to serve. We'd love to get back and involved again with the immigrant communities as we were.
That's what I want to see.
And if we want to improve internally, right? Improve internal perception of how we view, right? So we aren't stigmatizing. That has to be time spent with the people we serve to understand them. Mm-hmm. We don't have that time now. Mm-hmm. And that's why we need additional resources. This isn't a business ploy like, hey, look what you've taken from us.
Yeah.
Right? Give us back school, please. Give us back. I do think there's cause and effect long term with those being taken. But again, I think for the heart of community policing and service-oriented policing, for that to return, that's why we have to increase our staffing.
Well, the good thing about a podcast is that it's evergreen. right? It's always going to be there. So I want to make sure that we cover things that are, that could be pertinent, that are, I should say, relevant, no matter, evergreen relevant. And I think we've done that. But I do also want to make sure that you think about it in that regard, that, okay, this is going to be seen a year from now. There's probably going to be more people who see it 6 months from now than are going to see it in this month, and so on and so forth. Because if, we're developing this whole, platform. And so right now, there won't be that many people. They're going to be like, he's going to share it on Facebook. I'm going to share it on Facebook. Other people will be sharing it on it. So there will be people that see this, but it's going to be evergreen, like I said.
I would encourage the community, for those that are listening, to continue to invest in the process and the relationship with law enforcement. How do they want to be served? And that's ever evolving. We haven't arrived. Right. Again, you look historically.
Do you ever arrive, though?
No, you don't. There's a statement we just got done with procedural justice training all September, which I was involved with, and you look at Sir Robert Peel, and in 1821 he made the statement: "The legitimacy of the police hinges solely upon the perceptions of the public." That was 200 years ago. You look what they enforced back then, right? And then in the 1840s, how that all changed too.
Right.
So again, it comes down to relationship. It really does. And we need the community to be invested in the community, to be invested in each other, to be invested in us in that relationship, continue to sharpen us. But if we have people withdraw, people that just disengage because they feel like things are so big, it feels helpless, then I think in the long term, then communally, we're lacking.
I think it's very important to point out that, you see this attitude with Captain Abrahamson. And, the cops they're not our enemy. You know what I mean? They're not anybody's enemy. They're honestly, there's some assholes, but, they're honestly wanting to serve and protect. Am I correct?
You are. And I'd ask those that are listening too, when we do it wrong, please bring it to light. Because if you don't, right, we're talking about enabling or empowering, that's when those things need to be addressed at onset.
What if somebody, I share this on Facebook and several hundred people look at it and a couple comment and they say, well, what about this? How do I address that? If it's a valid question, how can I just contact you?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's great.
Cool. Good stuff.
So I think we're done. I don't know. If
my last comment is, let me know when I can do a ride along. I've always wanted to be a cop whisperer.
Will they let you do that?
I will actually.
Yeah,
yes.
I'll be whispering. I'll be saying,
that.
ask her what school she goes to. Okay.
But it's been a blast. I think we've had a really good time. I think we've accomplished some things, and I think a lot of people will benefit from this program. Thank you for watching Portland interview with Captain Abrahamson and Jathan Jenove.
The Italian.
I always get in trouble for that, but I love Jenove. It's such a great
Thought it was
name.
Russian, but I'm Italian.
All right, folks. Goodbye. See you next time.
You've been listening to the Portland Interview Magazine podcast. Go to TalkCastPDX.com for past episodes and check out all the great local programming on TalkCast PDX. That's TalkCastPDX.com.
Fib is a game for liars and thieves. It's the party card game that welcomes your poor etiquette. Lie, steal, laughter will ensue. And I'm gonna let you in on a little secret. Fib is still pre-launch, and you get to play the game before anyone else. All you need is a printer. Head on over to www.fib.games now to download the free print and play. Fib, a game for liars and thieves.